Good morning, West in the world. It is Thursday, October 23rd, and this morning we wrapped up our two-week discussion of the era of revolutions that we said at the beginning marks the sort of transition, at least in the thinking of many historians, between the sort of early modern world and the fully modern world, or where the patterns of life that are still basically familiar to us today come into existence. This week, our concentration has been not on the political, but on the socioeconomic and the Industrial Revolution. On Tuesday, we talked about why it's England and the Great Britain where these changes begin. Today, we tried to drill down into essentially two questions. What are the changes that people are experiencing as a consequence of industrialization? And secondly, how are they responding to these changes? How are they both being affected by them and trying to influence the course of those changes? To the question, what are the effects of industrialization? There were, within that category, perhaps two or maybe three things to keep track of. One of them, and perhaps the most noticeable, is the realities of urban life. That this is the most visible transformation, people moving from rural patterns of life to urban patterns. And this, we said, has tremendous consequences, ranging from smell and disease to questions about the very moral fabric of society and whether it can be sustained in these new, crowded urban contexts. Another effect of industrialization is to give birth to the modern system of social classes that we recognize today. So instead of the old estates system, we now have a distinctly sort of upper class or aristocracy, a middle class, and a new sort of working class or lower class or proletariat in this society. And understanding the ways in which that third estate, those commoners, differentiate themselves, the characteristics of middle-class people versus the characteristics of working-class people, the contrast between bourgeois and proletariat, will be important as we move forward. To the question of how are people responding to these changes, again, we talked about a few things. We talked about things, legislative changes that come about because of reform-minded people, like the Factory Act of 1833, which seeks to address, in particular, the problem of child labor. Other kinds of changes will come about as well. We talked about the movement for the creation of things like the Salvation Army, the literature of somebody like a Charles Dickens. We talked also about workers and their own kinds of initiatives in terms of strikes and unionization, as well as the movement, the appeal of movements of socialist political theory. And we talked especially at some length about the ideas of Karl Marx and why it is that these ideas have such critical appeal in this time period when working class people feel so oppressed. And Marx's theory about his age being defined between a tension of bourgeois middle-class interests versus proletariat working-class interests is going to be one of the most important contributing ideas of the whole 19th and early 20th centuries. So understanding things in those two general categories will give you a good handle for the discussions that we move into in the weeks ahead. On Tuesday, of course, we'll talk about Mendoza and his life in this very same era. In the week after that, we're going to be delving into sort of the ideologies of change, the philosophies that are going to begin to rewrite the script of European life in the 19th century. But those are things for next week. Good luck with your papers. See you on Tuesday.